All right, let's turn our attention to education issues now. And Equal Education says they're struggling to get information on overcrowding in schools in Gauteng. Also going on to say it makes it impossible to find a solution. Well, the National Department of Education has committed to reducing the number of pupils in classrooms, but Gauteng Education is refusing to disclose any information. Let's try and find out how we weave our way through this. I'm joined by Equal Education's Katherine Sutherland this morning, taking time to join us on the SA Morning. Katherine, good to have you on the show again. Always a pleasure speaking to you. So what information do you actually need as Equal Education?
Equal Education is asking for a list of all overcrowded schools. Currently, the GDE tends to think that that overcrowding is really just a classroom issue, whereas we know that there are all these other facets. You can have enough classrooms, but maybe your teachers are overworked, or you may not even have enough teachers. So we're asking for a list of overcrowded a list of overcrowded schools that takes those factors into account. We're also asking for a report and justification on how many teachers and non-teaching staff have been equitably distributed in 2022, which means how many teachers and staff have gone to the schools that most need them. And then lastly, we're asking for a forward-looking infrastructure development plan that tries to approach overcrowding in a proactive way rather than a reactive way.
And I see the problem with this, of course, is going to be when the Department of Education says they're committing to reducing overcrowding in classrooms, and possibly the other issues that you're talking about, Katherine, is that you've got no idea what their plan actually is. Do you get a sense there is a plan and they're not sharing it with you, or do you get the sense there actually isn't a plan, sadly based on previous years' experience?
I think that's the question. I know that there is a plan in terms of delivering school classrooms. The GDE has been implementing a new infrastructure delivery model, which essentially circumvents conventional procurement processes and ensures that schools are able to build classrooms more quickly and more cost efficiently. But as I've said, there's so much more to overcrowding than just that. So in terms of the
let's talk about what that actually is, if you don't mind. Sorry, Katherine, I jumped in there because I can't help but think, and it seems like a broken record at this point, but I can almost see this problem coming up. It's not just classrooms. There's not going to be enough transport. There's not going to be enough bathrooms. There's not going to be enough textbooks. Is that the kind of issues you're talking about?
That's exactly what we're speaking about. And I think that with the new MEC, we're hoping that he changes the way that the GDE is both speaking about and acting on overcrowding. I think with the last MEC, there were a lot of really great things that he did, but we really did struggle with the issue of overcrowding, just trying to get him to ensure that there's a holistic understanding.
I can't help but wonder as well, and I'm sure it's going to concern many parents. There's talk already, as there should be, for parents to start registering their children and start applying, start applying for classroom space and school space. Do you think if you go back to that early planning, overcrowding can be managed better if they were to look at the schools, know how many pupils they can actually handle, and then allocate pupils to schools based on the facilities, instead of just taking all the pupils they can and trying to squeeze them into as many schools as possible?
Well, I think the GDE's online admission system is definitely helping with that. It's easier for them to distribute learners across schools, but unfortunately what happens there is still, as I said, they're not taking into account all these other factors. So they may think that they're placing learners in the best school possible, but also at the same time they're always placing learners in schools that they're quite close to, so that they can avoid using scholar transport, which is particularly expensive. And on top of that, low resource schools really struggle to say that actually no, we're at capacity, whereas high resource schools will be able to put their foot down and say we aren't taking any more learners.
Help me understand, just clarify this concern for me, Katherine. So when we talk about Gauteng Education refusing to disclose any information, are you simply just not getting any feedback, i.e. radio silence, or have you gotten a response saying, hi, Equal Education, no, we're not telling you what's going on?
We've gotten a very, very brief response promising a meeting, but that was a very, very long time ago, and since then, absolutely nothing.
Why do you think that is? What seems to be the issue? Because normally, I would have thought Gauteng Education and Equal Education would work relatively closely together, roughly on the same page.
I think that we've seen with the Gauteng Department of Education in general, in comparison to the other provincial education departments, there's a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability. As in our media statement, we showed that when they were giving us National School Nutrition Program reports that were actually court-ordered, they were frequently late and there was very little valuable information in comparison to the other reports that we were getting. In terms of their ability or their willingness to give us this information, it does beg the question whether they actually have it in the first place.
Just as I say goodbye to you, Katherine, I just want to make sure I understand exactly what Equal Education is looking for as far as information. Imagine, as I'm sure is the case, Gauteng Education is watching this morning. Just lay out for me, in conclusion, what exactly do you want from them?
We would like a list of overcrowded schools where overcrowding is measured comprehensively, taking into account factors such as teacher workload, and how learners are spread across classes and grades. We want a report and justification on the percentage of teachers and non-teaching staff that were distributed equitably in 2022, and we want a forward-looking infrastructure plan that takes into account the growth of the number of learners and prioritizes infrastructure to overcrowded schools.
Well, hopefully that might get some conversation going as we get closer and closer to November and December, and of course more importantly into January. Katherine, I appreciate your time always in speaking to us. I'm sure we're going to follow up with you again, hopefully with some better news. Equal Education's Katherine Sutherland joining us here on the South African Morning.